And the conversation continues. Welcome back to the Doesn't Matter, Get Better conversation. Really excited to welcome in my next guest. He is a crisis management expert, news correspondent, keynote speaker, board member, specifically with JA, which is a organization that I hold near and dear to my heart. Obviously, my dad does as well. We do a lot with them. A Syracuse alum, go Orangemen. And just a person that I have met since I've jumped into the business world, and just am really, really excited to share this time with, because I believe he embodies the DMGB, and there's no doubt about it. So welcome to the conversation, David Dougles Greenberg. Excited to have you here. Welcome.
Thrilled to be here. We've been trying to get this for a couple of days, and the technology just wasn't working on my side. But we're here now, so let's do this.
Sometimes we struggle with technology, but glad to be here. And now that we're working and going, I'm excited about it. Just give a quick, 30,000 foot view of your journey from where you started, where you were born, where you grew up, through where you went to school, and now where you are.
Great. So I started in Rockville Center, Long Island. And I think, believe it or not, I moved around so much, and I'll tell you why. How I'll loop that in on why it helps. So I moved in junior high school from Rockville Center to Jericho. Went to Jericho for a year. Then went from Jericho to a private school up in Connecticut for 2 years, the Suffield Academy, and then went from Suffield to Syracuse. Spent 4 years in Syracuse. Opened up my own business. Ended up teaching there later, but we can talk about that. But I opened up a t-shirt business, and it was called Campus Promotions. And I ended up doing every fraternity, sorority, and bar on campus, between their t-shirts, their sweatshirts, their pullovers, and ended up selling. I didn't understand multiples at the time. So I ended up selling the business to a bar owner for $1,000 and free dinner for my parents, because I didn't want to wait online. I've never liked to wait online at a restaurant, for $1,000 and dinner the night before graduation, so I didn't have to wait. And he says, "Well, why should I do this?" I said, "Because I made $1,400 an order off of you." And to this day, they still use, the contents of my business. So when I walked in there and I said to him, I go, "Listen, here it is." I gave him an envelope, and he opens up the envelope, gives me $1,000. We sit down for dinner. I give him an envelope, 2 phone numbers. He's like, "What's this?" I go, "This is where you're gonna get your t-shirts in Chicago, and this is the printing place that's literally 4 blocks away from here that has your screens." And you know what? He still thanks me. So I went from Syracuse. I started as a runner in commodity market in the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Started making $2.75 an hour for a year. My father was a trader in New York in the silver market. I kind of wanted just to separate, like so many of us do for the beginning part, and then we tend to come back. When we've got our own legacy to now build on, like you did. And then I stayed a year in Chicago, and then I came to New York, and I clerked on the floor for about 2 years in silver and in crude oil. Then I traded gold for 2 years. I was one of those guys screaming, yelling, getting your head spit on, which was great. And then the Gulf War broke out. And then I went over to the New York Mercantile Exchange, and it was like the Hatfields and McCoy. I mean, literally on one trading floor, you had 4 separate exchanges on a 25,000 square foot trading floor. So I went over to the Merc and never looked back. So I was the guy that everybody hated. As one of the chairmen said, you became successful even though your father was a Comex guy, because people didn't change sides. It was a green badge for Comex, yellow badge for NYMEX. And I ended up trading during the Gulf War. I ended up working my way up through the NYMEX ranks. It's funny, my son, said, "Well, you were on the board." I'm like, "You missed the 15 years of lousy committee service I had to do." I started out on all the crap committees and all the ones people didn't want to stay on it. But you know what? I did that, and then I lost my first election, which was against one of Vinny's guys, which I knew I was going to get my butt kicked, because you don't go up against Vinny. And, I lost by like 300 votes. And the next year I lost by 8 votes. And the next year I lost by 3 votes. And then I won 3 consecutive terms, became a board member, executive committee member. We built the exchange up from a valuation. I brought Bain Capital in to value it when I first came in at $800 million. And then we ended up in 7 years, grew it to an IPO that went off at $12.5 billion. It was one of the most successful IPOs in history. And I traded through the Gulf Wars, through Katrina, 9/11 survivor. And we can expand on all that and how that's helped
Yeah.
me, in my coaching and also the things that I do on all the different boards that I sit on.
I love it. So an unbelievable story. And I think, it's so great that you say that, like, you wanted to separate first and build your own legacy before you came back. And I didn't even know that I was going to come back. Like, when I
Oh,
left to be a college football coach.
I'm the same way. I was going to Chicago. I was never coming back. It's like, how
Right.
when you're young, like, I am never going to, it's the first time that you learn, never say never.
No, oh God, that's another great nugget, is never say
Right.
never, because that you learn
Because
that
once you
so
say
quickly.
once you say it,
Lock it in.
you're doomed.
Place the bet in Vegas, because it's the
Right.
lock of the century. It's going to happen.
Exactly.
So talk to me about, there's a lot of change there from the start, going, over to the other side, and all of the different moves that you made from leaving to go to Chicago, and all of the different stops that happened on the way. What were some of the reasons for those changes?
Some of the reasons were you needed to move location. Some of the reasons was that it wasn't working. And as one of the traders on NYMEX, I was one of 17 traders that were brought down to Quantico by the generals. We had all the generals down there, and they just tore us apart. And they wanted to know how we thought so independently. And we could talk about the pit trading and what that does to the mindset. And the bottom line is, they kind of put it into perspective for me in the fact that there's a big difference between quitting and making a strategic retreat. Everybody, you know how many people have failed in business because they're like, no, I said I was going to do it this way. I can't quit. I can't quit. And I've actually helped people walk down the path of walking away from what they were originally going to do and pivot to something else, because sometimes not every idea is a great idea. And it's very hard to understand that. And with all that moving around, it helped me as a trader too, because when you're a trader in the pit, and I only traded my own money, I didn't have any customer accounts. It's like if I had a bad day, it was my bad day. I wanted to go home, kick the dog out the window, just put your head against the wall. But you had to take ownership. But with the thing that you learn is that when 70% of your decisions all day are wrong, you learn not to sit on your butt and be upset about it, and you learn how to turn and pivot. So all that moving from one place to another helped me in a multi-tiered way. It helped me understand that I can meet anybody anywhere, that it helped me be socially much better. It helped me adapt much better. It helped me pivot much better. But the one thing that I can bring into now that everybody's worried about and everybody's talking about, it taught me about the new normal. You know how everybody's talking about the new normal now and everybody's a little worried. What's the new normal? So I went through a few new normals that we can talk about. I went through all those moves. I went through being a 9/11 survivor and having to come down to ground zero the next day with Vinny, who's the chairman, and so many other board members to help get the exchange back over. So that was a new normal. I had an accident, which we can talk about, where I lost a sight in my right eye over 5 years. Well, that was a new normal. And what people don't understand, and what people really have to step back and listen to themselves when we're going into this new normal that everybody's talking about, is that we've all done it before. And what you need to realize, we've all been through a new normal. Really, if everybody takes a second or two, or some people longer, that, because they've had longer lives, and say, wait a minute, I went from being a college student to working. Well, that was weird. And but by the way, that was a new normal. Or I went from this job to this job. I transitioned. Guess what? That was a new normal. Or I got married. Well, we all know that's a new normal. I can go anywhere. It's a whole nother podcast. Or, I had all of a sudden, you have birth of your first child. You want to talk about a new normal? That was so intimidating that there was no rule book. So what ends up happening is that people have to understand that a new normal is all part of life. And if they realize that they've been through the new normals now and in the past, they're not going to be as intimidated about what's going to happen in the coming months, because you can look in the mirror and say, I got this. I've done this before.
Right.
And I think that's a real important message to get out to people, because it'll calm them down. I mean, I literally, I was there when the buildings fell. I was one of those guys running the street. I knew at that moment life would never be the same. But you know what? You stand up, you pivot, you figure it out. And, it's like flying. You used to, the old commercial of, O.J. Simpson, it's a whole nother story, but he used to run through the parking lot on the Hertz commercial, jump over the chairs and get onto the plane. No security checks, nothing. So then after 9/11, we have these security checks. We're all like, Jesus Christ, what's going on? But then after a while, we're like, okay, we got to go to the airport early because it's a security check.
Yep.
And that's what I think we'll be finding, that people will understand that they can do this,
You
and
hit
it's
a
okay.
word for me. You hit a word for me that is critical. I think, DMGB to me is a mindset. And you talked about the
Sure.
mindset that the trading floor taught you. Talk a little bit about what you learned about that mindset that you learned on the trading floor, because I think that it probably started even further back than that. But talk to me about the trading floor and the mindset.
Well, I think where the trading floor mindset comes back, and this is where I coach a lot of young athletes, I think athletics is the key to everything. I think the key to athletics is that you realize that you're part of something bigger than yourself, that you can mess up. I always say in my classes, what are you going to do more when you graduate than you ever did before? And we're going to work hard and we're going to do this. And I said, no, I'll clean it up for your audience. I'm like, you're going to screw up more than you ever knew that you knew how to screw up. And the thing about the trading floor with the mindset is that once you get comfortable with knowing that failing is all part of success, and I know it's a cliche, everybody says it, but nobody failed more than the traders on the floor. Okay,
Right.
I remember being younger. They talk about his quarterback Fran Tarkenton, from the Vikings, and he had the most completions ever at that time.
Right.
And everybody's talking about, but guess what? He also had the most interceptions. And you need to do that. And one of the reasons why my son was, an elite, NCAA, lacrosse player, was that very early on, I taught him, like when he missed the ball, how other kids would go, and they would get
Yeah.
ticked off. He just roll
Yep.
his shoulder, get the ball, and shoot. So he had no problem missing a shot. And
Yep.
once you get to the point in life where you have no problem missing a shot, whatever that shot is, the interview, the date, so many other things, that it's amazing to see, what can happen.
Right.
So,
I love
so it's
that.
a,
So the trading floor kind of taught you to be okay with failure, or to understand that, like, for you, 70% of your decisions were going to be wrong decisions, and you were going to have to live with that and wake up the next day. Talk to me a little bit about how your mindset was formed moving around so much as a kid. What did it teach you? Resilience? Did it teach you? Obviously, it taught you, how to adapt to different people and how to communicate in different scenarios. But what else did it teach you about kind of your mindset moving to a new place and new schools? And I think Suffield has had a few good football players too in its time.
Suffield's had a good football players, some good lacrosse players, and it was interesting because, once I got to Suffield, I realized I absolutely hated it. Okay, I was like, all the kids were there for 4 years. I just come in, so I ended up befriending a friend of mine who actually lives right down the block from me now, because we moved in the same areas. But the mindset was, as a young kid moving, that I was scared out of my mind. I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it. And at the end of the day, everything is a confidence builder. Everything is a step by step by step confidence builder. And people need to, I'm not one of these guys. I don't believe in trophies for everybody. But I do believe in, once in a while, you got to look in the mirror and pat yourself on the back, because
Yeah.
nobody else is going to do it, in a long way. So when you have these, and all these, the way that I talk to people and the way that I coach either my executive clients or the younger population, is that, there's differences between succeeding and then moving the goal line just before you score. And
Yeah.
then there's the difference between scoring, cheering, okay, I did it, and then reset the play.
Right.
And the thing about trading and moving around those schools is that you always had to reset the play. You always had to know that. And this is, I think, is the difference between people that get super success, mild success, and medium success, is that, and it's okay, everybody has their different version of success, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they should have different values of where the success is, because I don't look at success as how much money anybody makes. I look at success on how they are as a family man or a family woman, or how they are as a father or a son or a friend. There's so many different versions of success. And I've always said, like, I taught a lot at West Point and military academy, and I said, success is not about the car you drive, the clothes you wear, where you go for dinner. It's about success comes from leadership, more importantly, comes from within. And I think that all came about from understanding that you get a little humbled when you move from place to place, because you think you're a big shot, and then you find out you're not. And then you build that back up and you move again. I mean, listen, I had my best year in 2005 trading. It was literally, I mean, best year ever. 2006, we go electronic, and everybody went from having their best year, which was off the charts, to literally going negative. Okay. And you want to talk about a mindset change?
Right.
That's a mindset change.
It's interesting because, you hear that from athletes because, the athletes that make it to the NFL tend to be the best in high school, but then they have to reset and readjust when they get to college because they're now surrounded by a bunch of equals to them. They were all the same and guys that are better than them. And then if they make it to the NFL or make it to the professional level, again, they've been successful in college, time to reset again, because now you're surrounded by peers who are just as talented and have been in it for longer and have more, experience.
Very, very good point. And that came up when my son was being recruited. So he was being recruited by, like Brown and Dartmouth and, and all these schools, D1, and then he blew out his ACL his junior year of high school. It took a little bit of time to recover. And the coaches called me and said, listen, kid's great, but he's got your genetics. He's 5'8".
Yeah.
He's not huge. He goes, he's been playing against kids on Long Island, which are some of the greatest cross players out there, but he knew which weak side to go to, and he knew this. He goes, he's a great player, but now that he's a little hurt, we're a little worried that he might be a little bit slower. His reflexes might not be there, and my kids will hurt him. My kids, the defensemen, are 6'3" and 240. Right. And, so he ended up playing D3, which was great. Went to school Haverford, which really set up his whole outside of his career. But yeah, you're right. When you become at every different level, like, listen, as I was a clerk, I was a superstar. I was really good at what I did. So I figured, I'll go into the ring. I'll knock. And the first day of my ring, they come after me. They put you in your place. It's not for the faint of heart. And then I remember when I got on the board, I was like, oh, this is great. And I walk into the boardroom the first meeting, and the guy walks to me, just sit down there and don't even talk. And you know what? He was right, because he goes, you can only make yourself look like an idiot the first board meeting.
Oh my God.
He goes,
so
and if you it was great advice. And if you do that, your rest of your boardship will be defined by you making yourself look like an idiot that first day. And that's the problem that people have sometimes. People have a real problem with just being quiet and of taking it all in. I always say when I'm in these meetings, and I'm lucky enough to have some terrific mentors and people around me, and I'll walk in and I'll call my kids. I'm like, oh, this is great. I said, I was literally the stupidest person in the room. And they would say, well, you're not dumb. I said, compared to these people, I'm dumb. And I'm okay with that because I'm learning. This guy Gary Cohn, who was CEO of Goldman Sachs and was just on the president's head of economic development. He once said, when he started out at the Silver Ring, and my father actually made him his treasurer when my father was chairman. And he made a good comment when he got so high up in Goldman. And he said, listen, he goes, I gotta be honest with you. He goes, I got to where I was not because I was so brilliant, but I had great people around me. It was years ago when he said, even the president of the United States has a cabinet. And he told me this in high school. So I made this, I always talk about the knights of your round table, and everybody should have knights of their round table. And they can have a round table for personal reasons or a round table for business reasons. But the key thing is don't have people everybody at your round table that's just going to agree with you. You need to have somebody that says, are you out of your friggin' mind? Like, what the hell are you doing? Because you know what? That keeps you straight. Because neither one of us has ever looked in the mirror and said, oh yeah, that idea yesterday was awful. Right. Sometimes you need somebody to slap you around a little. So it's always good to have that.
Yeah, it's football staffs, the great football staffs that I was on were always built that way. Like the head coach is the head coach, and the motto in that is it's his ball. So like everybody's going to do what the head coach wants to do because it's his ball and he gets the final decision. But the great head coaches that I was around always had somebody that, even if it wasn't in the staff room, even if it was just one-on-one, they had somebody that was going to check them. They had somebody that was going to make them thinking about the decision in a different way. And I'll never forget getting hired at the University of Cincinnati at 27 as a special team coordinator and walking into our first staff meeting with Tommy Tuberville, and Eddie Grant grabbed me by my collar and said, don't say anything.
Right. Exactly.
It was the exact same thing, but then I understood because, and there's a great quote from a Denzel Washington movie that American Gangster, where he says, the loudest one is the weakest one in the room. And my dad loves to use that quote, but there's a sense there for me, at least at 27, I wanted to show everybody that I could deliver value, that like
Right.
I wasn't just there as a bystander because for whatever reason, I wanted to show that I had belonged there. And I think there is that you have to fight that urge to
Well, you
prove
have,
that you belong and just allow it to happen organically.
yeah. And what I tell my younger people is that what you don't realize, and I remember I would stand up in class and say, I have something that you don't have. And they're like, what? I said, I used to be you. I remember what it was like being on the other side of that desk and the teacher was up here. I understand. I said, so if you look at people and realize, and when you walked into that room, if we would have both realized that, wait a minute, all these people were in my spot at one time. And I was
Right.
also the youngest person ever elected to the board. So I get it. I was in my
Right.
30s, and I was on a, national, actually a worldwide exchange. It was one of the biggest exchange. It was the biggest physical commodity exchange in the world at the time. And what you have to realize is that these people have been us. And that's why I look at these kids. I remember I said one day, I go, how many people are lucky enough to still have grandparents around? And someone raised their hand. I go, what do you think of them? Oh, they're old. I'm
Right.
like, really? I go, all I know is that my grandmother in her 20s was the woman that was dancing on top of the bar. Okay. And my grandfather was an all-star athlete. I said, do you realize that your grandparents used to be you?
Right.
So I said, don't look at them as old. Look at them as a history lesson that you can talk to. And I said, just like you'll be able to talk to your great grandkids or grandkids about what it was like in the world with, in that time we didn't have Corona, but with 9/11 or Trump being president or anybody or Obama being president. And all of a sudden they came back from Thanksgiving with a whole different attitude. They told me stories of what their grandparents told them. And
Right.
I just shifted their mindset from, oh, they're old to, oh, they're the lucky ones that have survived. And what can I get out of this? And what can I learn
Yep.
from this? So it's all on
That,
that type of
that's a
mindset.
great takeaway. I love that. I love, looking at people, that have more experience than you. Don't look at the number. Don't look at what they're capable of now. They've
Sure.
lived a full life. So what can you learn from them? And I think I want to talk about something because we only have a couple minutes left. So I want to talk about
Sure.
something that's relevant to right now, because right now it became very sexy to be an entrepreneur. It became, and so everybody wants to be
Everybody's an
Mark
entrepreneur, right?
Zuckerberg, and everybody wants to be Jeff Bezos, and everybody wants to have the idea that's going to revolutionize the world, or everybody has their business that they think is the greatest thing,
And
but they don't
99% of them
understand
are
the work it
go.
takes to get to that point.
No.
What's some advice that you can give to me? I'm a young entrepreneur, right? I mean, obviously I built a career in something else, but now I'm doing something different and in a new place. What's some advice you can give to some young entrepreneurs about, how to continue to push through this time to be successful?
Yeah, understand that, for every one story that you hear, there's 100,000 stories of people that might be still living in their parents' basement, and what people don't understand, I mean, you have guys out there that are screaming off the roof about entrepreneurs, quit everything. You're not happy at work, quit. You're not happy with this, quit. You don't feel like going to college, quit. And then you have other people out there that is just, oh, the vibrations, and you need to be, everybody needs to be gratitude and grateful. Of course we do. That's human nature. You should be, but I like to be the guy that just says to you, like, listen, you want to be an entrepreneur? My own son and daughter are doing this, and I did it. You can have the entrepreneurial mindset while you're still working for somebody else. I tell people, I go in there like you own the place, not the attitude that you own the place, but if you own the place and you're sitting at your desk and you're watching things, okay, that this assistant does X, I wonder, how would I cover his payroll? Is this assistant or this person valuable for what they're doing? And then you hear about problems in the office, because guess what? You're doing it mentally on somebody else's dime, which is important. But you can learn and get years of experience. Okay, this thing about, it really worried me, because I would go, talk to people, and, you'd meet people and they give you their business card. Oh, I'm a CEO. Oh, really? That's great. Yeah, my best friend is my COO, and I have a desk at WeWorks. And I'm like, well, what are you doing? Well, we're pre-revenue. Okay. And these people, because they think they can get a nice website, a nice business card, a little sizzle, with $10 of promotion on Instagram or, any of the other things. And it's a nice fantasy for a little while, but then guess what? Back. Life hits them in the face. You got bills, you got your own bills. You got to figure out how to bring in revenue. You got to bring in cost-based analysis. And there's hiccups in the road, like coronavirus, 9/11, and 1,000 other things. So what I would tell people is there's nothing wrong with, especially with the 20-year-olds, use your 20s to your 30s to gain as much information. That work is like school. And you can literally have the mindset that, okay, I'm going to go out on my own one day. Okay. But it doesn't have to be today. If you can get a job in the area that you want to one day possibly be, in an entrepreneur, you're gaining extremely a lot of knowledge. And also, like you pivoted. You went from being, in football, but don't underestimate the amount of things and life lessons that you learned from that experience because you were performing at the highest level, right? And you knew what it was like when your team didn't perform or your player had a problem or you called a bad play or you learned about responsibility and you learned about how things can go south really fast, right? So what I say to these young entrepreneurs is very simple. There's time on your side. You can be an entrepreneur at 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 80, doesn't matter. But don't get caught up in the whole concept of, hey, I'm an entrepreneur. Because I got to be honest with you, a lot of people that when they hear that, it means that, oh, yeah, that means they're unemployed. Okay. It's not, people are getting, this whole craze of entrepreneurship is fading a little bit. How it was all big on Instagram. And then they realize that, oh, wait a minute, maybe I do need to get a job while I have my side hustle, And I think everybody should have their side hustle. Everybody should have their passion. Everybody should do this. But understand that, I'll give you a quick last story. And I went, for my interview in Chicago. And you got to remember the trading floors; they were crazy. I mean, people screaming, yelling, the colored jackets. The energy was like
the scene from Trading Places is always what I remember.
No, and by the way, they filmed that in the gold pit. And if there's one scene where they say, "And now the crop report," you'll see my father's badge, MTY. And I'll never forget that I spoke this guy. My first day was big shot in Chicago, and I walk in there like the cocky kid. I'm going to be your best broker. I'm going to kick ass. I am just going to be, wait till you see what I'm going to do. And he goes, kid, just sit down and shut up. And I'm like, okay. He goes, listen, it's really cool down there, but one of these days, right, you're going to think of it as a job like anything else. You're not going to want to come in. You're not going to want to get spit on. You're not going to want to get elbowed in the head. You're going to have a headache. You're going to have a sore throat. You're not going to want to be there. Says, but the bottom line is that at every point, not everybody's happy and on cloud nine with their job, but if it's providing a function for you to provide a living for you and your family, it makes it work. So some people, work to live. You don't want to do that. You want to live to work, but you want to be able to work and then have your side stuff. So just understand there are frustrating days. There are tough days. There are days that you're going to hit your head against the wall, but as a 9/11 survivor that watched people not come home, my last bit is I don't listen to anybody say they had a bad day. Because a bad day is when you don't come home. So that's something that people should think about. Every day that we're here is
you to wake up the next day and reset and go at it again. You've got opportunity, so it can't be that bad.
Exactly. And by the way, they might not be. I know somebody that just took a job. And she was like, oh, I can't believe I took it. I said, 26 million people just got unemployed and you're upset that you're taking a job you might not exactly like. I said to her, I go, take the job now, run it out as long as you can. And then when things get better, you can always pivot, but don't look at the downside. Look at the positive. You got a job. 26 million people are now unemployed. There's a rose in there somewhere. You just got to look for it.
I love it. Awesome. David, thank you so much for joining me today for our episode of the Doesn't Matter, Get Better conversation. This was fantastic. There's so many great nuggets in here for people to take and apply to their own lives to continue to push through hard times and get better. So thank you so much. I appreciate you more and more every day, and I look forward to more conversations.
I look forward. Thank you. This was awesome. Great way to start the morning. Thank you.
Thank you.